Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome to the Cornerstone Builder. My name is Josh Donnelly, and in today's video, we are going to take a look at how to set up geolocation conditional logic, which basically means being able to conditionally show an item based on the country or the city of your users. Now, to do this, we are going to use Cornerstone's native external API feature to tap into an external API that will match country codes with IP addresses. And while this might sound complicated on the surface, I promise you we are going to boil things down as simply as possible here and show you how to do this every step of the way. So without further ado, let's dive in. Now, the first thing that we need to do in this setup is actually create our API account, and we are going to be using MaxMind to do this. They have a free geolocation country and geolocation city API, and so that is what we are going to be tapping into. So if you head on over to maxmind.com, come over to products and select IP, geolocation, and intelligence. And obviously you can use whichever one of their services you want to tap into, but we are going to tap into this leveraging their free API account, which is this one right here. So let's go ahead and click Learn More. And now this page is going to tell us a little bit more about what some of the limitations are of Geolite, and obviously you can upgrade as needed, but we're going to go ahead and just sign up for the free account here. So let's click Sign Up for Geolite. Now I'm just going to populate this information. We'll skip over this screen and we'll go right into our account. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've filled out the account form and I verified my email address, and so now I have access to my free MaxMind account, which is what I'm looking at here under my account summary. Now what we want to do is specifically generate a license key for our API. So we're going to come over here on the left-hand side to manage license keys and click on that. You'll notice that we currently do not have any license keys in our account now, so we are going to click Generate a New License Key. And we can go ahead and give this a name. We'll call this Cornerstone Tutorial, and we'll click Confirm. Now, with our license key created, you'll notice that we have two pieces of information. We have our account ID here, and we have our license key here. And we need to convert this to a base 64 encoded format so that everything works properly within Cornerstone. So if you jump over to a website like base64encode.org, we can begin entering in our details here. And this is actually super simple. So we'll just simply grab our account ID first, and we're going to paste that in here. And then we need a semicolon, and then we paste our license key. So we'll grab that. We'll come back over here and we'll add that after the semicolon. So you should have account ID, semicolon, no space, and then your license key. And when you have that, we'll simply come down to encode here. We'll click that, and you'll notice we now have a base 64 encoded key right here. Now that we have set everything up from the API standpoint, we can begin working inside of Cornerstone. So the first thing we want to do is jump into the back end of our site first and foremost. And we want to make sure that we are on Cornerstone and then settings, because we need to enable our external API. So let's go ahead and scroll all the way down to the bottom under our advanced tab here. And you'll notice that we have external API beta. So we're going to go ahead and activate that. And then we're going to jump into configure. And you could just leave this blank, but in this allow list, we are going to be somewhat specific, and we are going to enter in the first part of the domain name for the endpoint that we are going to be accessing. So we're going to type in https://geoip/v2.1 and then a trailing slash in there. And this basically just specifies that no other domains will work. Now, there are other items that we're going to use here. The full path of the endpoint for country is actually country, so we could enter that in specifically, but we are going to take a look at how to change this from country to city and so on. So we're just going to use the first part of that domain right there. Now we'll go ahead and come up to the top here and click update, and now that is saved inside of our Cornerstone settings, and we can jump into the Cornerstone Builder to begin configuring things. So let's jump into Cornerstone, and the first thing that we're going to do is we are actually going to set this up as a global external API so that we can easily reuse it throughout our site to show things with these geolocation conditions. So we're going to jump into our globals here and scroll all the way down to the bottom. You should have this API category with global endpoints, and we're going to add a new endpoint, and we'll call this one geolocation. Now let's zoom in on this here so you can kind of see how things are being set up. We're going to make sure that run is enabled. Then under our endpoint, we're going to use that same base endpoint URL that we used in the Cornerstone settings on the back end and enter that into our endpoint field here. Now there is more to this that we're going to need to specify, but we're going to do that on a case-by-case basis. So we're going to go ahead and leave this endpoint just as is with version 2.1 and then the trailing slash. We're going to leave path empty here because we're going to control that on a case-by-case basis. Under our method here, we're going to set this to get. Then we need to add in our headers. And this part is important because none of this will work without authorization. So the first thing we're going to do is come in here and under name, we're going to type authorization. And under value, we need to first type basic, and then we're going to jump back to our base64 encoded license key here, and then jump back into Cornerstone and paste that in. And that's looking pretty good. Now we're going to add another header, and this header is simply going to say accept, and then our value is simply going to say application/JSON. Good. Now we'll scroll down to our requests, and we're going to set this to attributes. And we might as well set some caching on here, so let's go ahead and just set this to 1 month. Let's set a timeout here. We'll just do 7 seconds and 7 seconds. Now we do want to make sure that we enable follow redirects, just in case something changes in the future, our API will still work. And things are looking pretty good here. So let's go ahead and zoom back out and save our changes. Now with our changes saved, let's go ahead and create our page. So we'll click the plus sign up here and add a new page. And we're simply going to call this page CS Geolocation page. Now what we're going to do is set this to publish, and we'll start from scratch in our design. Now to get things started, we are simply going to test our API. So we're just going to add a div here, and then inside of that div, we'll add the API tester element from our elements library. Now, inside of that API tester element, let's click on the parent container, which is the looper provider, which is our red box here. Let's go ahead and click on that. Come over to customize. Now, what we're going to do is change our looper provider from external API to our external global API, which pulls through all of those configurations that we already set up. So we'll scroll down here, and right under external API, we have our external API global. So we'll go ahead and set that. And now we need to choose our API. So I'm going to come into my menu here and choose Geolocation, which is the global API name that we set up just before this. So you'll notice our current geolocation URL is this right here, which is geolite.info/GeoIP/v2.1/. This endpoint, we want to tap into the country endpoint. So we're going to, in the path, type country. And you'll notice it adds that to the end of our global endpoint there. So now it says country. And then we want to specify the user's IP address. So we're going to type in / and then open up Cornerstone's native dynamic content and type in IP address. We can then select that, and that will automatically fill this in. So geolite.info/GeoIP/country/IP address in there. And things are looking pretty good. Now, the only other thing we need to do is come down to our return type here, and we could do this on the global side as well. Our return type, we want this to be JSON. And you'll notice things now appear to be working. Now, if we don't want to set this each and every time that we do this, we can set this up as a global setting as well. And this just showcases the power of being able to manage things from the global level. So let's go back up to our globals here, scroll down to our geolocation API endpoint, and we'll make sure that our return type is always set to JSON, which now means that no matter what, if it's set to our global, it will return the proper format here. So let's go ahead and save that. And now let's jump back into our API tester. So now all we have to do when we're setting up a looper provider is make sure that we have our global API selected and that we specify a path. So why did we leave this path editable here on an instance by instance basis? Well, the reason is because we can actually change our path endpoint here from something like country to city. So currently it's set to country, and if I look at the response in the code here, you'll notice that the country ISO code is US. But if I change this to city, and I'm using a VPN, so let's see what city it puts me in. We'll go ahead and scroll down, and it has me in the city of Seattle here. So we can get very specific in what we want to pull. We're going to go ahead and set this back to country though. So we're targeting currently the US, and everything appears to be working, which means we can now begin working on our design. So we'll go ahead and leave our API tester here, but let's add 2 sections. And in this top section, let's make it, I don't know, blue, maybe something like this here. And inside of this section, we'll add a div, and then we'll add a headline. And inside of this headline, we'll type Hello USA. Let's make this a little larger here, and we'll make it bold, and we'll make it white, and we'll center it. Okay, that is looking great. So now let's go ahead and jump into Customize. We're going to set up our looper provider, and remember, we're going to select our external API global. We're going to make sure that we select our Geolocation API, and let's specify our path. We're going to target based on country, / and then we need the user's IP address. So we'll type that in here and add that in. And that's looking pretty good. Now let's go ahead and make sure that we are consuming that API provider. So let's click consume, and now we should be in business. So let's come up to conditions here and type in add condition group. We're going to make this a string, and inside of the string, we are going to find looper, and we want a looper field. And the field that we want to target here is specifically our country.iso_code, so that we're getting this US here, right? So we're simply going to type in custom key, and then in here, we're going to type in country.iso_code, and we'll click plus. So now we're saying only show that section. You'll notice it's disappeared right now. Only show that USA section if country code is, and we need it to match whatever is showing here. So US. All right. So show this if country code is US. And I think that's looking great. Now, let's go ahead and duplicate this section. And this one, just so it's easy to see here, let's go ahead and make it red. And this one, we're going to say, Hello, France. Now in this red section, let's click Customize, and everything's already set up nicely here, but under our conditions, instead of country code is US, we want country code is FR for France. And so now we have one section that's going to show for the US and another section that's going to show for France. So let's go ahead and save this here and jump out to the front end of the site. Now remember, my VPN has me in the USA, and so I am seeing USA here. But to keep things simple, if I jump over to something like proxyfree.com and I place our page URL in here and I click proxy free and I let this load, you'll notice two things. One, it's saying hello France, and where's it getting that from? Well, if I scroll down here, you'll notice that I am in continent code EU, but if I come down to country, I'm in ISO code FR for France. So it's showing me the France section here. Now, if you need to be able to see or edit sections, even though you might be in one country or another, you can simply come up to your preview pane drop down here and make sure that you set your element conditions to ignore, which will then show you all of your sections inside of the Cornerstone preview, even if your country codes don't match. And just like that, you've now learned how to set up geolocation conditional logic directly within Cornerstone. As always, I hope you guys find these videos useful. I look forward to seeing what you guys create, and I will see you guys in the next video. Happy building!